In this video, I'm going to be covering the inverse trigonometric functions. So if you have something like sine of theta is equal to, I don't know, let's say 1, and you try to figure out, or you ask the question, what did you plug into sine? In other words, sine of theta equals 1? Cool. What is theta? A way we can figure this out is we can do what are called the inverse trig functions. And it's written this way. Theta would be equal to sine inverse of, in this case, 1. Now, you can throw that in the calculator. The only thing I'll tell you is the calculator is going to give you probably radians, unless you put it in degree mode. If you've put it in degree mode, which I'll now assume you did, you would get sine inverse of 1. That should be 90 degrees. Why? Well, because sine of 90 degrees is equal to 1. Likewise, there's a cosine inverse and a tangent inverse. The main thing is that for sine and cosine, you can't put in any number bigger than 1. So for example, if I did sine inverse of 1.1, right, only barely bigger than 1, this does not exist, and the calculator will freak out and tell you so as well. The main thing is that sine and cosine, the originals, never were any bigger than 1. So sine of theta is always less than or equal to 1, greater than or equal to negative 1. And cosine of theta, likewise, was between negative 1 and 1, which means that when you do sine inverse, the number you're going to plug in for sine inverse will always be, and I'll write it this way, between negative 1 and 1. You'll never plug in a number bigger than this. And if you do, you made a mistake somewhere. Likewise, for cosine inverse. You'll never plug in a number greater than negative 1 or 1. And we have what are the standard angles for sine. On the unit circle, if you've got an angle, let's say it's 45 degrees, technically you could just go around the circle again, right? And you could keep doing this. Or you could go the other way and get a whole bunch of other values as well. Well, the inverse trig functions will usually give you what are called the standard outputs. So sine inverse, if you plug in one of these values, the answer you get will always be between 0 and 180 degrees, at least for positive values. Play around with the calculator and see what it spits out. But by convention, these are the standard values you get, at 0 to 180. Cosine inverse, the standards are going to be negative 90 degrees to 90 degrees. Or perhaps 90 degrees, which is up here, down to 270 degrees as well could work. The main thing is to think yourself about what the angle should be and use those values in your calculations. So these are the inverse trig functions. There is also tangent inverse. I'll go ahead and put down his definition here. Tan inverse of theta. Tangent's a little bit different. Tangent could actually take all values, so we'll write that as negative infinity to infinity. Tangent inverse can take all values, and it'll spit out something between negative 90 degrees and 90 degrees, not included. Because remember, tangent was sine divided by cosine. Cosine is 0 at 90 degrees, and you can't divide by 0. So that's why tangent's a little bit irregular. But likewise, tangent of an angle could spit out really big numbers. There was no restriction on that. Okay, so these are the inverse functions. I know this one seemed kind of abstract. The main thing is if you're solving a problem where you actually have the value of something and you're trying to find the angle itself, that's when you use these guys right here, the inverse trig functions. And that is this tutorial.